Okay, this is going to replace the front brake master cylinder. One of these Triumph accessories. So what you need to do is an 8mm head bolt, 10mm nut. Just remove that, and it comes off the bracket. And then you take the bolt out of here, and it'll actually fit right in the groove. You can see there's a groove right here. And it'll sit like that. But before we do that, I'm going to show you guys a little trick. You can drain all the fluid out through the whole system, but in this, do it when it's dry. But what I like to do, save yourself a little time and hassle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the cap. I'm going to drain this, and then I'm going to disconnect it here, and then really fast I'm going to plug it into the new reservoir. Now the trick is when you have this removed and it's drained here, do not pump the front brakes, because what will happen is it'll have air in it and it'll suck air into the system, and then you're going to be trying to bleed the system with air bubbles. Instead, you fill it up, and that way there's fluid all in it, and then you bleed the whole system with fresh fluid, and you're not worrying about introducing air to it. What's very important, plastic. Get a plastic bag, wrap it all around where you think fluid might end up dripping. This is very important. If brake fluid gets on paint or anything and you're not aware of it, and you don't clean it off fast enough, it will damage the paint. Personally, I like to put a bunch of stuff underneath. That way, if something does drip, it's all secure. Okay. So there's Phillips screws for the top. And when you take this out, just be careful, make sure it doesn't drip. There's going to be the diaphragm here. You can see as fluid gets low. I just changed brake pads on this, so check the other videos, you'll see the brake pads. But as the fluid went low, because the pads were wearing, this actually goes down as well to eliminate any air. So make sure you get that, make sure it doesn't drip. So now, to get the fluid out, what I like to use is a little syringe. And what that'll do is it'll get fluid out. It takes a little while. You want to get all the fluid out, because when you take this off down here, it'll drain out. Okay. Now remember, when you disconnect this, a little bit's going to come out. So what I want to do is just keep things simple. Stick this back on here. You can see I pushed it back in there. You don't have to put the top back on, I just like doing that. Okay, so now we're going to replace the two reservoirs. Just take some needle nose, compress them, slide it back. As you pull it up, leave this pointing up, because that'll keep the fluid that's in there. What I like to do is that spring, try to leave it in the same spot Oops, sorry. And as you stick this in there, it'll open that spring up. And that way it stays in the grooves. It looks like it's OEM. Sometimes if you slide it down and then stick this on, it'll be hard to get in there. And then you just line it back up. Now, what I want to point out, see how the hose is pinched a little bit? I don't know if you can see that. Right there. See how it's creased a little bit? That's not cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it so it fits. So since it sits like this, I'm just going to trim the hose a little bit so that way it'll be more of a direct line. Okay, so once again, I'm just going to pull this off. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this clamp, this spring clamp off. So as you trim, start out slow and then move on until you get the best fit. Because once you cut, you can't go back. So I just cut a little bit that time. Let's give it a try. Without the spring on, I'm just trying to line it up. It's a lot better, but you know what? I'm going to trim up a little more. Just to be safe. Just a little bit, not much. There we go. Okay, you can see from this angle, it's not kinked anymore, and it's a pretty direct line. Okay, now that you have the length where you want it, back it out once again. Get that spring, just put it right on the end of it, and install this back on. And as you push it in there, the spring will move. So as you head up here, just line up the spring clamp so it looks good. The Reservoir came with a bolt. Snug it up. And you can see it's not kinked, looking pretty good, snug on here. So now you take it, now you got to put the fluid in. Once again, don't be touching the brake until you get fluid in there. It's a good habit to get into when you open these, just to double check, make sure there's not any particles in it. Before I did the video, I looked to make sure there wasn't any particles, because the last thing you want to do is introduce some kind of metal shaving into it. Okay, now what you want to do is fill the reservoir full of brake fluid. Once again, do not spill it. And you can go ahead and fill it past the window, the fill line, if you want to bleed the brakes. This particular bike, I'm going to go ahead and bleed the brakes, flush new fluid all the way through it, so I'll have another video to show you how to bleed everything. So click on that video and you can see how I do that as well. Now after you fill it, what you want to do is I usually tap this a little bit That'll get any air bubbles out. In theory, the air bubbles will go to the top. Okay, once you do that, I'll put my hand over it just so nothing will pop out. Then I squeeze the brake. And it's good. I don't see any air bubbles coming up, which is good. So, if you didn't want to bleed your whole system, you're good to go. The brake feels good. You got the new reservoir on. Okay, once you're done doing the brake fluid, you just make sure you compress the diaphragm back. Put that on. Take the cap. Wipe off your fingerprints. You're good to go.